The $200 scam is something every gardener should understand. Welcome back to the garden, a place where we do not just grow tomatoes, we grow wisdom. Today I want to talk about a quiet little springtime scam that drains our wallets every year while smiling at us from a wall of plastic bags. Picture this. You are at the garden center, excited to start a new raised bed. You see that towering display of premium, organic, perfect soil. It looks clean, safe, and guaranteed, so you do the math. A standard 4 by 8 raised bed needs about 32 cubic feet of soil. That is 16 big bags, and at $12 a bag, you are suddenly down about $200 before you have even bought a single seed. Then comes the part nobody warns you about. You haul those heavy bags into the cart, into the car, and out of the car. You stack them in the yard, and your back reminds you that you are not 25 anymore. You slice bag after bag, pour it all into a wooden box, and you think you are ready. But ready with what exactly? Mostly dead dust, a sterile mix that may look nice on day one, but often compacts, dries out, and needs constant rescuing if you want it to stay productive. And here's the real trick. The industry wants you to believe there is no other way. They want you to fill every inch from bottom to top with their product, because if you believe you have no alternative, you will keep buying every spring forever. But what if the real engine of infinite living soil isn't in those bags at all? What if it is already in your backyard rotting quietly, waiting to be used? That pile of branches from last winter's storm, the old logs in the corner of the property, the wood you have been meaning to haul away, what if that waste is actually black gold in disguise? Because the richest soil on earth was never built by shopping carts and plastic bags. It was built by nature, using what other people throw away. So let me ask you honestly, have you ever felt that sticker shock at the garden center? Have you ever thought that gardening is becoming a luxury project instead of a simple joy? If you felt that, you are not alone, and you are not doing anything wrong. You have just been sold the wrong story. Stay with me, because we are going to expose the raised bed scam, and I will show you how one simple waste layer can liberate your garden and your wallet. Now let us slow down and look at the science, because once you see this, you cannot unsee it. One of the biggest myths the soil industry sells us is the idea that a raised bed must be filled with premium, expensive soil from the very bottom to the very top, as if plants are digging down like miners all season long. But nature tells a different story, and the charts from universities and extension offices across the country quietly agree. Here is what they show in plain language. Most of our favorite vegetables live in a surprisingly shallow action zone. That is the layer where roots actually feed, where microbes do the heavy lifting, where warmth collects, and where water and nutrients are easiest to reach. Think about the quick growers first: lettuce, spinach, and radishes. Those roots often stay close to the surface, barely reaching around 6 inches deep. They are not trying to explore the basement of your raised bed. They are dining at the top table. And then come the so-called deep-rooted celebrities: tomatoes, peppers, and even carrots. In a typical home garden setup, yes, they can reach deeper under perfect conditions. But in most raised beds with regular watering in decent soil, they rarely push far past about 12 inches. For the bulk of the season, most of their real work, most of the feeding, and most of the uptake still happens in that upper zone where life is richest and easiest. So here is the question that should make every gardener pause. If the top 6 to 12 inches is where the action is, what exactly is happening in the bottom half of a 2-foot deep raised bed? For most of the season, it is largely untouched territory, not useless, but underused. It is the quiet basement below the party, especially in year one when roots are still establishing, and the weather keeps pulling plants back to the warmer, more active surface layer. And that means something very important for your wallet. When you fill the lower 40 to 50% of your raised bed with expensive bagged soil, you are literally burying your budget in a place your vegetables may barely visit. You are paying premium prices for real estate your plants do not rent. Now I want you to notice something almost poetic here. The very thing we call waste is usually sitting in the exact place we need it most. Every yard has a hidden supply: fallen branches, old logs, that leaf pile you keep meaning to bag up, the woody pieces that look like clutter, the the storm debris you normally drag to the curb, and the scraps you think you should clean up to be responsible. But what if being responsible is the opposite? What if the smarter move is to stop exporting your fertility and start building with it? Because this is not about skimping. This is not about cutting corners or doing things cheap. This is about matching your materials to what the plant actually needs. It is about building a bed like nature builds a forest floor, where the richest layer stays near the top and the deeper layers become a foundation that supports life slowly, steadily, and for years. So next we are going to take that untouched territory at the bottom of your bed and give it a job, not as dead weight, but as a living engine. And once you see what rotting wood can do down there, how it holds water, builds structure, and feeds the underground world, you may never buy 16 bags of soil the same way again. Now this is where the story turns from saving money into something genuinely thrilling, because burying wood at the bottom of a raised bed, an old German method called Hoogal cultur, does not just fill space. It changes the bed into a living machine, a self-sustaining ecosystem that quietly works for you while you sleep. To understand why, imagine what happens to wood as it breaks down. It does not simply vanish, it transforms. As decomposition begins, the wood becomes more and more porous, almost like a sponge with countless tiny chambers. Scientific tests show it can hold up to 5 times its own weight in water. That means a single 10-pound log can store around 50 pounds of water inside its structure. And that changes everything in the heat of summer. When July arrives and the sun starts pulling moisture out of the ground like a thief, most raised beds dry from the top down. The surface bakes, the soil turns dusty, and plants begin to droop the moment you miss a watering. But a bed with a wood core behaves differently. That buried waste becomes a subsurface reservoir. It holds water when it is plentiful, then releases it slowly when conditions turn harsh. Through capillary action, moisture can wick upward from deeper layers toward thirsty roots, almost like the bed is breathing water back into the soil. And that is why gardeners who build this way often discover something that feels almost unbelievable at first. They can water far less, sometimes close to half as often, and still keep the bed evenly moist. But the wood's secret does not stop at water. As it decomposes, that breakdown is driven by life. Microbes, fungi, and countless invisible workers. And whenever biology is active, it releases energy. In early spring, when the air still bites and the ground is slow to wake up, a raised bed with a thick wood core can run noticeably warmer than the surrounding soil, sometimes 5 to 15 degrees Fahrenheit warmer. Now, for younger gardeners, that might just be an interesting detail, but for us, it is a gift. Because warmth is time. Warmth is an earlier start. Warmth is the difference between staring at seed packets in late winter and actually getting your hands back into the dirt with confidence. That gentle, steady heat acts like a natural warming pad beneath the bed, helping roots settle in, helping seedlings handle those unpredictable late frosts, and giving you the chance to plant 2 to 4 weeks earlier in many climates. So when you bury rotting wood, you are not burying trash. You are planting a hidden system, one that stores water for drought, builds warmth for spring, and turns a raised bed into something far more powerful than a box filled with bought soil. Next, we are going to meet the invisible architects that move in next. Because once fungi and their networks take hold in that wood, the bed does not just hold moisture and heat, it starts delivering life. Now let us step into the part of this story that feels almost invisible, and yet it is the reason this method works so well. Because inside that waste layer, inside the logs and leaves you buried on purpose, something begins to happen that a sterile bag of soil could never replicate. Most bag mixes are built for convenience, not for life. They are often based on peat moss and perlite, shipped dry, processed, and nearly sterile by the time they reach your cart. They may look clean and fluffy, but there is no real community living inside. No rhythm, no soul. It is like buying an empty house and wondering why it does not feel like a home. But when you bury real organic material, wood and leaves, you are not just filling space. You are building habitat. You are creating what I like to call a microbial reef, a protected city for the hidden life of the soil. And the first master builders to arrive are fungi. At the beginning, you may not see them. Then one day you lift a bit of soil and you notice delicate white threads, almost like cotton or spider silk. weaving through the cracks in the wood. Those threads are called mycelium, and they are not just mold. They are infrastructure. They are the plumbing and the highways of a living bed. Because mycelium does not simply sit there and decompose. It explores, it connects, and it reaches into pockets of moisture and nutrients that plant roots cannot easily access. And then it transports those resources across the bed like a delivery system. Studies show these fungal networks can move phosphorus, nitrogen, and even water from deep inside a rotting log and deliver it straight to a tomato root faster than water would naturally spread through plain soil alone. And that changes the entire relationship you have with your garden. Instead of you constantly pushing nutrients into the bed with chemical fertilizers, dumping, feeding, correcting, and rescuing, this underground network begins to pull and deliver what the plant needs in a steady, natural flow. It is not a burst of growth followed by exhaustion. It is a slow, dependable supply line that keeps improving as the bed matures. That is why gardeners who build this way often say their beds feel different. After a year or two, the soil does not just look darker, it behaves differently. It holds together, it stays springy, and it feels alive in your hands, as if the garden has finally stopped fighting you and started working with you. And here's the quiet lesson hidden inside all of this. These fungi do not thrive as individuals, they thrive as networks. They succeed by connecting, sharing, and moving life from where it is abundant to where it is needed. In a gentle way, they remind us of something we sometimes forget. We are at our best when we stay connected to neighbors, to friends, to family, and to our little communities of knowledge and care. Because strength does not always look like independence. Sometimes it looks like a network that quietly supports you so you do not have to carry everything alone. Next, we will talk about why this matters beyond your backyard. Because those bags of perfect soil come with a cost most people never see. I know we all love convenience. We are busy, our bodies get tired faster than they used to, and sometimes that neat stack of bagged soil feels like a shortcut that makes gardening possible. But we have to talk about the cost that never shows up on the price tag. Because every spring when we roll those bags into our carts, we are not just buying soil, we are buying a system, one that quietly turns gardening into a disposable habit. Every year, more than 500 million plastic bags of potting mix are sold. Think about that number for a moment, 500 million bags. Most of them are used once, sliced open, emptied, and then tossed away. And those bags do not disappear. They end up in landfills and hang around for centuries, persisting for roughly 400 years like a shadow we leave behind for people we will never meet. Even harder to swallow is what that adds up to. We are generating over 1 billion pounds of new plastic every single year just to deliver soil that often compacts, dries out, and loses life in one season unless we keep rescuing it with more inputs. It is a one-time container for a short-lived promise. And then there is the ingredient that almost nobody talks about when they are standing in that garden center aisle: peat moss. Most bag mixes rely on it because it is lightweight, holds moisture, and looks beautiful in a bag. But peat bogs are not just muddy swamps. They are some of the most powerful carbon storehouses on Earth. They cover only about 3% of the planet's surface, yet they store roughly twice as much carbon as all the world's forests combined. So when peatlands are drained and scraped to be packaged for our backyards, something ancient gets released. Carbon that was locked away for thousands of years is pushed back into the atmosphere, feeding the very climate shifts that make gardening harder. Hotter summers, stranger rains, harsher droughts, and seasons that feel less predictable every year. And here is the part that stings a little because it is so simple. We do not actually need to participate in that cycle to grow beautiful food. Because the waste we have been talking about, branches, logs, leaves, already exists where we live. It does not need to be mined, dried, shipped, wrapped, and sold back to us. It just needs to be used wisely. So when you build a raised bed with that waste layer, you are doing more than saving money. You are making a quiet, stubborn stand for the planet. You are choosing a circular economy in your own backyard, where nothing is thrown away and everything has a purpose. And maybe that is one of the most powerful things we can do, not because we are trying to be perfect, but because we have lived long enough to recognize the difference between a disposable shortcut and a lasting solution. Next, I will show you exactly how to build this infinite soil bed step by step, so it is simple, practical, and so clear you can do it in one afternoon without breaking your back or your budget. All right, my friends, if you have been listening and thinking this sounds wonderful but wondering if you can actually do it, the answer is yes, you can. And you do not need fancy tools, you do not need perfect materials, and you definitely do not need 16 bags of store-bought soil. All you need is a simple, dependable method, one you can follow like a recipe. I call it the lasagna protocol because we are going to build this bed in layers, and each layer has a job. When those jobs work together, you do not just get a raised bed, you get an infinite soil bed that improves year after year. So let us build it step by step in a way that feels clear and doable. First, you begin with the core, the foundation, and this is where the 40% rule comes in. You want the bottom 40 to 50% of your raised bed filled with thick, untreated logs and sturdy branches. This is your long-term engine. If you have hardwoods like oak, maple, or fruit wood, those are excellent because they break down slowly and feed the system for years. If you only have mixed wood, do not panic. Use what you have got, but try to prioritize the heavier, denser pieces on the bottom. At the same time, there are two materials you should avoid if you can. Cedar tends to resist rot, which means it won't transform into that sponge-like reservoir the way you want. And black walnut is a hard no for vegetable beds because it contains a natural chemical called juglone that can harm many garden plants. If you remember nothing else from this section, remember this. Untreated wood is good, but black walnut is trouble. Once your thick wood is in place, you move to the next layer, and this is the filter. Now you are going to pack the gaps with smaller sticks, twigs, and last year's dried leaves. Think of this as building a dense carbon mat. You are not trying to make it neat. You are trying to make it function. Those smaller pieces help lock the structure together. They trap air pockets that keep the bed breathing, and they hold moisture so the whole system does not dry out. They also slow decomposition just enough to keep everything balanced instead of collapsing too quickly. And now we come to the part I want you to listen to very carefully, because this is the non-negotiable step, the nitrogen buffer. This is where most people fail, and it is why some gardeners try this once and say it did not work. The reason is simple. Wood is high in carbon, and the microbes that break it down need nitrogen to do their job. If they cannot find enough nitrogen in the layer above, they will pull it from the surrounding soil, and that can leave your plants hungry in the early phase. So you stop that problem before it starts. Right over your stick and leaf layer, you lay down a generous 2 to 4 inches of greens. Fresh grass clippings work beautifully, aged manure is excellent, and yes, used coffee grounds can help too, and many places give them away for free. This green layer is your protection. It is the buffer that keeps microbes satisfied so your plants do not pay the price. Then, and only then, you finish with the soil cap, the layer your vegetables will actually live in right away. Here is the beautiful part. You do not need to fill the entire bed with expensive soil anymore. You only need about 6 to 10 inches of rich compost or good garden soil on top. That is it. This is the part you might buy if you do not make your own, but now you need only a fraction of what you used to. And that single change is how people cut a $200 bed down to something far more reasonable without sacrificing results. And before you walk away, here is one simple pro tip that makes the whole system work better from day one. As you build, water each layer thoroughly. Do not just water the top when you are done. Water as you go. That helps settle materials, removes big air voids, and starts the moisture reservoir immediately, so the bed wakes up faster and behaves like a living sponge instead of a dry pile. Now take a breath and notice what you have done. You did not cheat, you did not cut corners. You built like nature builds, layer by layer, purpose by purpose. Next, I am going to show you the payoff, because once this bed matures, the results are the kind that make you dig your hands into the soil 2 years later and smile like you have just discovered a secret the stores never wanted you to know. Now let me paint you a picture, my friends, because this is the moment that makes people believers. Imagine it is 2 years from now, not next week, not after one quick harvest, but after this bed has had time to mature, to settle, and to become what it was designed to be. The air is warm, the garden is quiet, and you walk up to that raised bed with a trowel in your hand. You dig in and you do not find dry, dusty dirt that crumbles like chalk. You do not find a lifeless mix that looks the same as the day you poured it in. Instead, your tool slides into something dark and springy, something that feels alive. The soil has body, it has softness, it holds together just enough, and when you lift it, it almost seems to breathe. Then you notice them, earthworms, plenty of them, moving through the bed like tiny engineers, turning waste into fertility, aerating the soil, and leaving behind the kind of natural plant food no bag can promise. And you realize in that quiet moment that you did not just fill a raised bed, you built a system. Now here is what makes this more than a beautiful story. One homeowner who switched to this exact method decided to track her results, not with guesses, but with real numbers. She built one bed the way most of us were taught. It cost her around $200 in bagged soil, and it demanded constant watering, especially when summer heat arrived. Miss a day or two, and the surface turned pale and thirsty, and the plants let her know immediately. Then she built a second bed with the waste layer method. This one cost her about $45 because she used what she already had, logs, branches, leaves, and only needed to top it with a smaller cap of good soil. And the difference was not subtle. Even after a full week without rain, that bed stayed damp beneath the surface. The plants did not panic, the soil did not crack, it held moisture like it had a memory of water and refused to let it go too quickly. When she added it up, she had saved $155 on just one bed, and she cut her water use roughly in half. But here's the part she cared about most, and I think you will too. The real prize was not the savings, it was the performance. Her tomatoes were not just fine, they were the envy of the neighborhood. Rich green vines, steady flowering, heavy clusters, because those plants were not relying on quick fixes. They were plugged into a living grid, a hidden network of fungi and microbial life that kept delivering what the roots needed day after day without drama. And that is the grand reveal. This is not a shortcut that gives you cheap results. It is a smarter foundation that gives you stronger results because you are no longer gardening against nature, you are gardening with it. Now we are going to step back and look at what this really means, because once you understand how waste becomes legacy, you start to see your whole backyard and even your own season of life through a different, more hopeful lens. And now, my dear friends, let us step back for a moment because this story was never only about raised beds. As we get older, we begin to understand something that younger people often miss. Waste is not a fact, it is a perspective. A fallen branch is not trash, it is potential. A pile of old leaves is not a chore, it is a blanket for the earth, a quiet protection that nature has been using for thousands of years. When you build a bed this way, you are not just saving money or working around high prices. You are practicing a kind of wisdom that the modern world has tried to replace with convenience. You are saying, I do not need everything wrapped in plastic to be valuable. You are choosing to see what you already have and to turn it into something that grows. And there is something deeply beautiful about that, because these beds follow the oldest rule of all, the circle of life. The old feeds the new. What falls in winter becomes food in summer. What looks finished becomes the beginning of something better. And when you build soil that improves year after year, you are doing more than growing vegetables for one season. You are creating a living legacy, healthy ground that will still be there for the next generation, quietly richer because you chose to build it the natural way. So the next time you are at the garden center and you see those expensive plastic bags stacked like they are the only path to success, I want you to smile, not because you are judging anyone, but because you know a secret. Now you know that the richest ground on earth does not come from a store. It begins with what others throw away and with the courage to trust nature instead of marketing. So, what do you have in your backyard right now that could become soil? Do you have branches from a storm, old logs, piles of leaves, or even a stack of sticks you have been meaning to clear out? Tell me what you have in the comments, and I will bet you will inspire someone else who thought they had nothing to work with. If this story changes the way you look at the debris in your yard, please subscribe to the channel and like this video. We are uncovering the history and the methods that have been hidden for too long. Let's plant the future together. The next treasure of wisdom will be revealed soon.